It's a lot like the old story. If a doctor gave you 3 pills, and how long would it take, and take one every 4 hours, how long would it take you to take the 3 pills? All right, most of you would say 12. It's 8, because you take one, and then 4 hours later you take number 2, and then 4 hours later you take number 3. That's a little good one you can use at school tomorrow, or Tuesday or whatever. See, most people don't count that initial pill, and so I wasn't counting 1982 as year 1. But when I went back and the other day I thought, well, I just want to make sure this is right. And so I went back to 1982 as year 1, and then it'll come out to 35 when you do that. Realize that you don't start in 83, you started in 82. But I have been blessed. Jonathan, how many years have you been here, just out of curiosity? 18. All right, the first 17 years then, I didn't have anybody laughing at my jokes. Until Ansley got here. I was here all that time. I was still funny, but nobody was laughing. But it is good to be here, seriously. And isn't it amazing about Brother Darrell? I know all of you love him, and you think about, well, what can I do with him being laid up like he is? And the answer is just simple. He wants somebody to talk to. He's like me. He's a people person, and I can't think of anything that'd be more miserable than just sitting, looking at 4 walls when you like to be around people. So just an amazing thing. A lot of times we want to do something big for God, and it's just a small thing that God wants. But Jonathan, thank you. That was a wonderful introduction. That was a real blessing to me. Jonathan has such a beautiful voice, doesn't he? I asked him before church if I could sing a duel with him, and he said, it's not duel, it's duet. He said a duel is when somebody gets hurt. I said, Jonathan, you ever heard me sing? But anyway, Ansley, it's good to hear that. I think you were gone last year or something. I don't remember. I appreciate the apples. Miss Carolyn, of course, is not able to be here tonight, but she sent her apple. And that is so sweet. And I make a big deal every year that it's not officially New Year until the apple drops at Mount Vernon. It's not the one at Times Square. But now I don't know how I ended up with 2 apples. The only thing we could figure out is there must have been a backup apple. Somebody must have thought, well, Miss Carolyn might not be able to make it. Wouldn't it have been interesting if everybody had brought an apple thinking that Miss Carolyn wasn't going to make it? But I was just telling my wife before I left home, she said, I don't know what we're going to have to eat in the morning. Said, the cupboard looks pretty bare. I said, don't worry. Like Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett, I'll go out hunting and bring home an apple. So I hope that'll work. Before we get to the scripture, and here's the plan. I'm actually going to try to teach the book of Esther Monday through Wednesday nights. So you might ask, well, what are you doing here tonight? Well, I like to talk about prophecy and to sort of give you an update. I call this my State of the Union prophecy message. In other words, what has been going on since last year that could update us. None of us know now when the Lord's coming. I always want to be clear that I never predict that this will be the year the Lord will come, or next year will be the year, or whatever. We don't know that. But just some things that are going on in our world that would sort of help us understand that I think it'll be soon. But before we get to that message about prophecy, I saw this in a magazine that I take. It was a few months ago, I guess, but actually I just saw it over the Christmas holidays. And I thought, well, it might not be bad just to have this run off and take it to church and just sort of let you see what's going on in our world. It's called the World Watch List 2014. Obviously, 2015 has just concluded, so it's a little bit premature to have that list. But it's a list of the 50 countries in the world that persecute Christians the most. I think the United States will be on the list pretty soon. But it's 50 nations. And if you'll notice here, it says the first 14 of them, this extreme persecution. In other words, if you lived in country number 1 through country number 14, you would be under extreme persecution for being a Christian. Folks, I want you to understand that it's not safe anymore to be a Christian in this world. We hear about ISIS and all that stuff in the Middle East. The main people they're killing are Christians. That's the one thing the news media, they don't share that. You know, they just talk about, and it's bad enough what they do share, but they don't share about the Christians. But isn't this amazing that North Korea has headed the list for 12 years in a row? In other words, if you were a Christian, the most unsafe place in the world would be North Korea. We have become, not we as us, but we as our government has become friends with Iran. But even as bad as our government is, we haven't become friends with North Korea. But that is the worst country in the world as far as persecution. Now, if y'all are like me, some of these countries you've never heard of. And some of these countries I'm not even sure how to pronounce. I did go last night, I Googled a few of these nations just to see where they were at. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but if you are just curious, somehow I could get it for you because I wrote down a few of these that were just unfamiliar. All of us are familiar with Iraq, which is Syria and Iraq coming in at 3 and 4. Afghanistan, we're familiar with that. Saudi Arabia. Like I say, Iran, number 9. I would have thought they would have been a little bit higher, but these are people that know more than I do that rate this. Then you get to countries 15 through 27, I believe it is severe persecution. In other words, it's bad. Now remember, the first 14 are the worst. That's extreme. Then to drop the category to severe persecution, I don't know if there's any country. A lot of these countries that end with "stan," like Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and Kazakhstan, and all that. These are countries that came out of the old Soviet Union. They're over, if you had a map, they'd be below Russia in that area of Asia. But like I say, I can't even pronounce half of these names. And when you get to number 46, I really can't pronounce that one. I think it is somewhere off the coast of Africa, but I couldn't pronounce it. But the countries 28 through 50 is moderate persecution. In other words, it's not really safe, but they're not necessarily just out killing Christians. I was a little bit surprised that India, I guess, was on the list. I always just figured if you lived in India, that's a Buddhist nation mainly, but they do have a large number of Muslims because India is so over 1 billion people. China, of course, is over 1 billion people. But nevertheless, y'all may or may not care anything about this list, but it just sort of shows you where, and I almost would guarantee if you went home and Googled these countries and began to try to find out something about their government, just about all of them are Muslim governments. That's the ones that are mainly trying to kill Christians are Muslims. That's again, I say, as I said last year, not all Muslims are terrorists, but it does seem that the world is sort of headed into a religious war between Muslims and non-Muslims. But anyway, whether you take this and throw it right in the trash or if you can use it, I thought it was interesting just to look at the countries. And if you'd asked me just off the top of my head a month ago what country is the worst country in the world persecuting Christians, I wouldn't really have known, but it's North Korea. But anyway, having said all of that, the verse that we'll use tonight, I'm calling it a generic verse. It's Ezekiel 33:11. It's a very familiar verse, really, but I'm calling it a generic verse because I really did not come to speak on Ezekiel 33:11. I'm just using that as a base because I want to talk to you on this subject tonight, anarchy and the Antichrist. Anarchy and the Antichrist. I have felt led of the Holy Spirit. I don't know where God is going with this, but I have felt that I need to do more study on the Antichrist this year. I think the appearance of the Antichrist might be near. And I will share with you tonight why I think that. But Ezekiel 33:11, God is giving an instruction here to Ezekiel, and he says, "Say unto them, as I live, saith the Lord God, I have no pleasure in the death of the wicked." He says, "But that the wicked turn from his way and live. Turn ye from your evil ways, for why will you die, O house of Israel?" You know, we could substitute one word there. Why will you die, O house of America? Why will you die? A country that's founded by people that love God, came here for religious freedom. Why will you die? Leonard Ravenhill wrote a book years ago, and I have the book, but I really have never read it. The title's fascinating. It says, "America, You're Too Young to Die." America is a young nation compared to the countries of the world, but we're in serious trouble. And of course, this is my opinion, but I believe that America is facing the greatest challenge in 2016 that it has faced since the 1861 beginning of the Civil War. In fact, I have made this comment at church. Hardly anybody catches it, but I just sort of make it and go on. I'll say something about something that happened in history, and I'll say, "Oh, that was during the first Civil War." And then I just go on, and nobody really catches it. The first Civil War. You know what I'm implying? We're on the verge of another one. We are a deeply divided country. I made the statement last Wednesday night at prayer meeting that I dreaded to see 2016. I know it's typical at New Year's Eve and all that. We go around saying Happy New Year, and all of that. I tried to change it this year to have a blessed New Year, because I don't believe it's going to be a Happy New Year for America. Now, I hope you do well, and I hope you have a good year, but our nation is divided. And the division is getting great. It's not like, well, we're divided, but at least there's some healing. No, it's not. And it doesn't seem to be that our leadership wants healing. And so we are in serious trouble. If in the nation of Israel, and they don't have any friends in the world, I would say tonight that Israel has absolutely no friends. Now, I know there are a lot of people in America that support Israel, but our government does not. And there was a leader of Canada who supported Israel, but he was voted out in the last 12 months. The new leader of Canada is no longer pro-Israel. So there's absolutely no country in the world that would be Israel's friend. But I was watching someone the other day on television who was from Israel. And Israel, you might think, well, everybody there thinks alike. They probably all know that there's great division in Israel. Their leader, Benjamin Netanyahu, I love him, but a lot of people in Israel don't like him. In fact, he barely won re-election. But you know what that guy said? He said, we might fuss at each other, but when it comes to security, we stick together. In other words, that's the only way they can survive, is that they have to stick together. But here is America. We have been attacked by terrorists. Has it brought us closer together? No. But let me, before we get to that part, let me talk about what happened in Paris a couple of months ago. Remember, I'm talking about anarchy, which is an absence of government control, just everybody rioting and doing their own thing. And I'm eventually going to tie this to the Antichrist. So if you'll hang with me, it's going to sound like current events for a while, but I'll eventually tie it to the Antichrist. A couple of months ago, I cannot remember the exact date. I believe it was on a Friday night in our time. Of course, Paris is about 6 or 7 hours ahead of us. But it was on a Friday night, and they had the terrorist attacks in Paris that were so bad. And Fox News was covering it without commercials. I mean, it was just continuous coverage. And they had Shepard Smith. If you watch Fox News, you know who Shepard Smith is. If you don't, then it's just a name. But they had him doing the news. He was the anchor man, I guess you'd call it, and then he would talk to people over there in Paris and everything. But he made a comment that I thought was rather interesting, and I quote Shepard Smith. He said, "We're on the verge of something new." We're on the verge of something new. And he's exactly right. When a terrorist attacked Paris a couple of months ago, I believe the world moved, and Europe in particular, toward the Antichrist. The world is moving toward the Antichrist because Europe is in bad shape. The greatest prophetic incident of the last 100 years was the reestablishment of the nation of Israel in 1948. That was the greatest prophetic sign since the day of Pentecost. But the number two most prophetic event in the past century was the formation of what is now called the European Union. Can I call it the EU? That'll save time. The EU. All right? That'll get y'all to me sombrero a little earlier. All right. The European Union. Now, the reason that's so amazing is if you know anything about history, and I'm sad that it's not taught in school anymore. It grieves me because I think our young people need to know history. But there were 2 world wars in the last century, and all of it started in Europe, the world wars. And then in 1957, just 12 years after World War II, 6 of the European countries came together and formed what they called back then the Common Market, but now it's called the European Union. Does anybody know how many members they have? Chance for you to buzz in now before y'all doze off. There's 28 countries in the European Union. All right, they are connected economically. They have their own money. I think it's called the euro, isn't it? They're connected geographically. But there's one area where they're weak, and that is they do not have a strong political leader. Now, there is a leader of the European Union. I don't even know his name. He's so insignificant, he's sort of wimpy, and, I don't know who he is. But I'm going to predict to you tonight that there is coming a strong man out of Europe that will be known as, or we will know him as the Antichrist. Of course, I'm hoping we'll be gone, but nevertheless, he's going to be the Antichrist whether we're here or not. It's a satanic Superman that is going to come. And the reason that Europe needs the Antichrist is because of what's now called the refugee crisis. If y'all been keeping up with the refugee crisis, you better, because they're coming to the United States. The refugee crisis. The idea is that there are people who are fleeing from Syria, from the war zone over there, and they're trying to get to a place where they'll be safe, and many of them are coming to Europe, and our president has invited some of them, we don't know how many, to come to America. Well, the refugee crisis, almost all of them are Muslim. In other words, all these people that are flooding into Europe are Muslim. The great majority of them are men. Most of them are from the ages of 20 to 35. They're supposedly going to Europe to find jobs. Did you know, dear, the unemployment rate in Europe right now is 11%? And the unemployment rate among people under the age of 25 years old in Europe is 20%. That's extremely high. In other words, there's something fishy about this. Why would they be going there for jobs when Europe already is in, the economies are bad? But here's another thing. If these people are fleeing, as they say they are, from war, why wouldn't they want to stay and defend their wives and children? This is strange. I'm just telling you, I smell a rat here because this doesn't add up. And yet the United States is willing to take these people in. And the word the news media uses is vet. I don't know what that means, but they say we can't vet them. That means that we don't know who they are. We don't know where they came from because they have no birth certificates, no passports, no identification. We're just going to let an unknown number of people come into our country and we don't know who they are. Isn't that strange? I mean, this is just curious. But Europe is facing the largest influx of immigrants that they have had since World War II. And as I said, they're mainly Muslim. Well, they're basically all of them. I'd say 99% of them are Muslim. And so they're coming into Europe. Now, Europe is where the Antichrist will come from, based on Daniel chapter 2, chapter 7, Revelation chapter 13, and chapter 17. But it's probably clearest in Daniel chapter 7. Now, the Antichrist is going to come, and he will come now before Jesus. Y'all need to be aware of that. We always say we're looking for Jesus to come. We should be. But the Antichrist will come before Jesus. The only thing is we're hoping as a church that Jesus will come get us before the Antichrist gets here. It's called the rapture. Okay? But the Antichrist is going to come out of Europe. He will come from what is known as a revived or restored Roman Empire. Now, the Roman Empire covered a whole bunch of territory, but it was mainly in Europe. Where is Rome? What country is Rome? Italy. Italy is in what continent? Europe. So if the Antichrist is going to come out of the old Roman Empire, and the Roman Empire's headquarters was Rome, wouldn't it make sense to you that he'll come from Europe? All right. Now, what's been going on in Europe? Now, y'all don't sit here and say, well, that doesn't bother me. I don't care what's happening in Europe because it's coming here. I'm just saying the crisis is in Europe right now, but it's going to come to America. Things aren't looking too good in Europe. Let me give you a few facts. There are about 6 of them if I can remember them. I don't know if I can remember them or not. Number one, in the last 50 years, the Muslim population of Western Europe, which, by the way, if you would go on genealogy.com, ancestry.com, if you would look up where your ancestors came from, most of them came from Western Europe. Most of the people here tonight, if you would go back far enough, it may be 200 or 300, 400 years, but they probably came from Germany, England, France, or somewhere in Western Europe. All right, the population, the Muslim population of Western Europe in the last 50 years has gone from 250,000 people to 20 million. Just look at that contrast. From 250,000 people 50 years ago. A lot of us were alive 50 years ago. Jonathan wasn't, but a lot of us were. The population was 250,000 in Europe. Now it's 20 million Muslim. All right, here's fact number 2. Did you know that the Muslim population of Western Europe will double by the year 2020? That sounded like a long ways off, doesn't it? That's only 4 years. Now, when that prediction was made, it was in 2015, so let's just say 5 years. The population, Muslim population of Europe will double in 5 years. By the year 2035, which is 20 years, it will double again. And folks, now that's not that far off. Now, for some of us old folks, 2035 seems like a long ways off, but for young people, 2035 is not that, it's only 20 years from now. And the population will double again. And by the year 2035, the majority of young people in Western Europe will be Muslim. Now, that's a fact. Now, that's not my opinion. Fact number 3. Did you know there are more Muslims in what is called, if I say the UK, do y'all know what I'm talking about? Who would tell me what UK stands for? The United Kingdom, all right? We're not talking about the Magic Kingdom now, Disney World. We're talking about the United Kingdom. I always call it England. I still, but England is only a part of it. It has other parts like Scotland and Wales and Ireland and so forth. But anyway, the United Kingdom. Did you know there are more Muslims in the United Kingdom than there are Baptists and Methodists combined? I want you to hear that now. There are more Muslims in the United Kingdom than there are Baptists and Methodists combined. Put them together. Now, folks, the reason that's so tragic, most of our early great preachers in this country came from England. Spurgeon didn't come here, but he preached in England. And the Wesley brothers and our Christianity, most of it we can trace back to England, and yet now there's more Muslims there than there are Baptists and Methodists put together. Okay, fact number 4. At the end of World War II, which was 1945, at the end of World War II, there was only one mosque in the entire country of England. A mosque is a place where Muslims meet, somewhat like a church. I told you all last year there's one in Albany, Georgia. There are mosques being built all over America. There was one mosque in the whole country of England in 1945 at the end of World War II. Now there are thousands. And hundreds of the mosques in England right now have been abandoned churches that the Muslims moved in and took over. Folks, this is scary. Fact number 5. In 1974, which was just 41 years ago, 1974, there was one mosque in the entire country of France. Now there are hundreds. You see what's happening? Muslims are moving into Europe. Don't think they won't come to America. Okay? Fact number 6. And by the way, where was all this terrorist stuff a couple of months ago? In Paris. Where is Paris? It's in France. Only had one mosque 40 years ago. Now they've got hundreds. Germany this year, this is fact number 6. Germany this year, 2015, okay? I can't remember, it's a new year. I'll probably still put 2015 on the checks, but they'll catch that at the bank. Germany, in this past year, has agreed to take in 1 million of these refugees, supposedly fleeing, war-torn countries. They've agreed to take in 1 million refugees. All right, Saudi Arabia, heard of them? That's where we get most of our oil. Saudi Arabia, which is in that Middle East, they're not taking in any. They won't even have any to come into their country because they know that ISIS has infiltrated these refugees. So Saudi Arabia will not take any of them. Germany's going to take 1 million. However, Saudi Arabia has promised to take their oil money and build 200 new mosques in Germany for all those people that are moving there. So they won't take the people, but they'll build mosques for them in Germany so that they'll move there instead of going to Saudi Arabia. There are several of those countries, like Saudi Arabia, who will not take the refugees in. So what does that tell you? They know something's wrong. Okay? Now, what is the problem in Europe? Why are they having such a problem? Why is it sort of centered there? It's because Europe has what's called open borders. You ever heard that word before? Or words? They have a border problem. If you'll go back to just a couple of months ago, that Friday night when they attacked Paris, you know what the president of France did, the first thing? Close the borders. What do we do when there's a terrorist attack in America? We start an argument about gun control. You see? Not even, it's like someone told me before church tonight, it's a distraction so that people will get their eyes off the real problem. The real problem is we've got terrorists living among us. Yes, they're using guns, but they're also using pipe bombs and all kinds of other things. But rather than trying to figure out how to get rid of the terrorists, It's a lot easier for the president and the government just to start an argument over gun control. Then there'll be a big fuss, and the terrorists keep coming in. See? It's all part of a plan. Let me go back to what I was saying about the borders. I looked this up because on the night that, I stayed glued. I don't watch news. I know y'all think, well, he must just watch. I bet he just lives a boring life, just sits there and watches Fox News. No, I don't. I haven't watched Fox News 10 minutes in the whole week. I usually just watch when they have a shooting, like in San Bernardino, a few days ago, when there's like the Paris thing. I mean, I just stayed glued to it that night because you didn't know what was going to happen. And they still had some of them, they were looking for, and it was still active. Anyway, I went and looked this up. Out of the 28 countries in Europe that's part of the European Union, 22 of them allow what they call free travel. All right, here's what I'm getting at. I am not an experienced traveler. Coming to Baxley is about as far as I want to go now. This is about as far down here. I have to go further next week, but anyway, maybe I'll have the nerve by then to go further. But 22 of the 28 countries of the European Union. In other words, once you get into the country, you can go all across Europe without another passport. So you can go from to France, Germany, those countries. In other words, if you're riding a bicycle, you just ride across into that country. They don't stop you. They don't check your visas or whatever, passport. You just go right on. If you're driving, you rent a car. You can drive all over Europe, 22 of the 28 countries, no borders. So that's one of their problems, and in their European Union Constitution, they say that if you are in a war-torn situation and you feel threatened, you can go to their countries. And they have what they call a quota system, meaning that each of those countries are to take in so many refugees. Do y'all remember what happened in Hungary? Is anybody paying attention to this? You know what happened in Hungary a couple of months ago? The country of Hungary. I'm not saying it's your Hungary. You probably are. But I'm talking about the country of Hungary. They tried to put up fences to keep these people out. And the news media just roasted them. In fact, one news commentator called it racist. That's what you call people when you don't have an answer for what they're doing. You just call them a name. That way you don't have to debate it. It's not, the news media don't know the difference between race and religion. The leaders of Hungary, which is a Catholic country, said, we don't want to become Muslim. We don't want to let all these people in here. We don't mind a few, but we don't want them coming in mass, so they put up fences. But they have quotas. And like I say, if you say that I'm threatened, I feel like if I stay where I'm at, I'm going to be killed, they will let you go into Europe. They usually cross the Mediterranean Sea, come in at the bottom, Italy and Greece, and then make their way up towards Germany and Sweden, make their way up into Europe. And because of the fact that so many Muslims are entering now, we have a demographic time bomb. Because how are they going to get rid of these people once they let them in? Any of you thought about that? How are they going to get rid of them? They're coming in as refugees, meaning they're fleeing a war. They're coming in. And by the way, some of them are pitiful. I mean, it's pitiful, some of them. But I'm just telling you, if you don't know who they are and you just let a bunch of people in, you don't know what you're asking for because you don't have any way to check these people to know who they really are. That's what's happening. And the birth rate among Muslims is far higher than it is among Christians. And therefore, Europe is changing rapidly, and we got 20 years now, and Europe will be a Muslim continent. So, here's what I believe the Lord has shown me, and I'm just telling you this is what I believe. Now, I'm not saying that I was awakened at 3 o'clock in the morning, that I had a vision, but here's what I believe is going to happen. I'm making my prophetic State of the Union speech, okay? It may be pathetic, but I'm calling it prophetic. All right? I believe that since the Muslims are swarming into Europe, and Europe is already having financial problems, they're having that before the Muslims get there. And you got all these people coming in then wanting schools, health, welfare, and help. And so how are they going to be able to pay for all this stuff? And when they get in there, how are they going to get rid of them? The truth is they're not. They're not going to be able to get rid of them. So what I predict will happen, class, is that Europe is pretty soon, I don't know now, I'm not saying it'll be before next year, but it's going to have to be pretty soon. They're going to start demanding a leader who has the authority to make these people behave. Right now, they don't have it. In other words, they can go all over from one country to another. They can go, and when that strong leader comes, guess who it'll be? You might think if Europe is in danger of becoming Muslim because all these refugees are going in there, you might think that the Antichrist will be a Muslim. But I answered that last year. But everybody wasn't here last year. And even if you were, it may have went in one ear and out the other, because, just because we hear something one time at church doesn't mean that we'll remember it completely for the next year. There's 2 verses in the Bible that I think make it very clear that the Antichrist will not be a Muslim. What I am, and we're going to look at these 2 verses in a minute if our PA system here, y'all have the most sophisticated equipment at Mount Vernon of any church that I go to. Now, I'm not just trying to flatter you. I'm just telling you, I will never forget the Sunday that y'all threw up the island of Patmos here when I was on Revelation, and I didn't know where Patmos was myself. And y'all put it up here on the screen. But Daniel 9:27 is one verse that I think makes it clear that the Antichrist will not be a Muslim. But I want y'all to get what I'm implying tonight. I'm saying if Europe does not get a strong political leader, the Muslims are going to take over that continent. So I believe they're going to have the Antichrist come to stop it. Therefore, in a way, the Antichrist will be seen as a savior of Western civilization. Because remember now, from Daniel chapter 8 and Revelation chapter 6, he will appear as a man of peace at first. The Antichrist will not be a terrorist. He will not be the leader of ISIS. He will appear to be a good guy who will appear to have all the answers. And the world right now has a power vacuum. You've noticed that President Obama does not want to lead. He doesn't want America to lead. That's why Russia has begun to step up, because they've seen that America's not going to do anything. I'm surprised they're not doing more, because it's obvious we're not going to do anything. So there's a vacuum there. In other words, nobody's leading. When you don't have a leader, then all kinds of things will happen till somebody steps in that gap. Daniel 9:27, and I realize you'd have to study this in context. We're just throwing one verse on the screen, and you'd have to read the whole section. But I can promise you, because I have taught the book of Daniel here at this church, that this is talking about the Antichrist. And it says, and he, talking about the Antichrist, shall confirm the covenant. A covenant is like a peace treaty or an agreement. With many, in context, that many there is Israel, the Jews. For 1 week, the word week in Hebrew there means a week of years, which is 7 years. In other words, he will make a peace deal for 7 years. That will begin the tribulation. We're not yet in the tribulation. Preachers get junk mail. I mean, you just let them know you're a preacher, and all kind of junk mail comes to the office. Somebody sent something to the church a few months ago, it was some kind of chart claiming we were already in the tribulation, that it started such and such. No, the tribulation hadn't started yet. It will not begin until there's a 7-year peace deal in the Middle East. Now, here's the question, class. See if y'all can answer this. would a Muslim leader make a peace deal to defend the Jews? Absolutely not. The Muslims hate the Jews. And the Jews are the main ones they want to get rid of. In fact, that's really where it'll all end, is in Israel. All the stuff can go on in Syria, they can go on in Iraq, they can have stuff going on. It's going to all end in Israel. So it's all going to end up. A Muslim leader would never agree for 7 years to defend Israel. And then the next question, would Israel trust a Muslim leader to defend them? No. So I'm just telling you, that doesn't make any sense. But here's another verse, 2 Thessalonians. This is in the New Testament now. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 4. Now, I went over these verses last year, but I don't know how many of you were here the night I went over this. It says there, and in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, if you read that, the first 11 verses, 12 verses of that chapter, it's talking about a coming man of sin that we would know as the Antichrist. But it says here, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God. In other words, he will be the anti-God or the anti-Christ. Or that is worshiped so that he as God, in other words, he won't really be God, but he will be acting as God, sitteth in the temple of God, which hasn't been rebuilt yet, but it will, showing himself that he is God. In other words, this world leader, who I think will come out of Europe, will eventually have control over the whole world for at least 3.5 of the 7-year tribulation. He will announce to the world that he is God and will demand to be worshiped as God. If you were here with me last year when we studied Islam, the Muslim religion, they only believe in one God, Allah. They do not believe that Allah has a son. They don't believe in the Trinity. Any Muslim that claimed he was God would be immediately beheaded, because to them that would be sacrilegious. That would be blasphemy. I do not believe the Antichrist will be a Muslim. Now, there's some TV preachers that do. I mean, I'm just saying that's my opinion. But if Europe is becoming overrun with Muslim refugees so that the continent is going to change, who's going to stop them? It will have to be someone who has great authority. That person is not yet on the scene, but my prediction is that he will be coming soon. But now, will it be before next year? I can't say that. I don't know the exact dates. But remember, I'm telling you, the Muslim population of Europe will double in 5 years and double again within 20 years. And by that time, the continent will be mainly Muslim. If the Antichrist is going to come, it would seem to me that it would need to be in the next 20 years. But now, I can't set dates. So what is going on in the world of prophecy? We see the refugee crisis. Let me just quickly mention a couple other things, and then we'll close for tonight. Tomorrow night we'll start on Esther. But I just wanted to bring you up to date because most people are interested in prophecy. It's true that it's somewhat scary. It is, to be honest, it is scary. And we fear for the future of our nation. I fear the election this year myself. I personally don't believe there'll be one. That's my opinion. I've said that for years. I noticed last night on Facebook, Dr. Ben Carson's agreeing with me. But, whether he does or not, that's my opinion. God didn't show me that. That's just my opinion. But nevertheless, I can't remember now. Oh, yeah, a couple of things I just want you to be aware of before we close tonight, because people are always wanting to know, are we living in the last days? Do you think the Lord's about to come? We're not to set dates, but it appears to me that the world is ready for the Antichrist to come, and the Antichrist will come right before the Lord comes, unless, the rapture takes us out first, which is what I believe, but everybody doesn't believe the way I do. But there are a couple other things I want to quickly mention to you. One of them is in regard to gun control. I think, and I've already said this, but I'm going to say it again. because I have learned, and any of you that are school teachers, you should know that your students aren't going to pick it up if you just say it one time. You're going to have to say it over and over and over. That's the way football teams learn plays. It's called repetition. They run the plays over and over till they know what to do. You can't just put a play in one time and expect everybody to do it. But gun control in this country is a diversion, because if our president or whoever the leaders are, if they don't bring this up and get people arguing about it, then we're going to wonder, how did these people in San Bernardino, how did they get here when the FBI knew that they had been radicalized? How did they get all these weapons they've got? How did they pull this attack off the other day? How did these people, from time to time, in Chattanooga a few months ago, remember when they killed the guys there at the recruiting station? The argument should be that the guys there at the recruiting station should be armed. But that's not what you heard. What you heard was, we need to take the gun. See if this makes sense to y'all. We have terror groups. The FBI leaders even said this. This is not political. This is just what the FBI guy said before Congress. He said that there are active terror cells in all 50 states, which I believe that. But I'm not in the FBI. The FBI leader said that there are terror cells in all 50 states. In other words, there are terrorists working somewhere within all 50 states. In other words, their goal is to kill us. Now, tell me if this makes sense. If the terrorists have come here to kill us, are we safer by giving up our guns? That's insane. That doesn't even make any sense. I'm not saying everybody needs an AR-15 or whatever they call it. I don't know one weapon from another. I don't know an AR-15 from a New Year's apple. I don't know one thing at all. I do know the Second Amendment guarantees the right and the reason they put that in the Constitution was because if everybody's weapon is taken up, then the only people that have weapons would be who? The government, okay? So we would have a dictatorship. That's there to protect us. Now, true, some people may go crazy and have hundreds of rounds of ammunition and kill people. That's sad, that's tragic. But the solution is not to take everybody's guns. We will not be safer. In fact, that doesn't make any sense. I predict this. Since this is my night of predictions. Now, I'll be out of the predicting business after tonight. Don't ask me to predict anything else. I should predict y'all may not come back because you may have heard enough. But I predict that we really can't, the president's going to make an executive order on this. I'm not sure what it'll be. But I don't see how he can just throw away the Second Amendment. Just say, well, that's not in the Constitution when it's right there. So what I think is going to happen, and I may be wrong, I think it's going to come down to the United States government, if they haven't already done this. They may have already done this. It's going to come down to this. They're going to sign some kind of international agreement where to take up people's guns or to restrict people's guns or whatever will be used as a way of fighting terrorists. And therefore, when someone goes to court with this, and they go before the Supreme Court and say, hey, you can't restrict our right to have weapons because the Second Amendment gives the citizen the right to bear arms, and the courts are going to say, yes, but an international agreement overrides the United States Constitution. That's what I predict is going to happen. If y'all don't think the United States Supreme Court will rule that way, where were you on June 26 when they ruled on same-sex marriage? I can't tell you how many people have come to me and said, I never thought I'd see that day in the United States. And remember now, the longer a president stays in office, the more judges he can appoint, because over time these judges retire or die, and then the president gets to appoint. But now at the same time, I'm not trying to paint this as a Democratic problem, because the Republicans are the ones that approve of these guys too. Let's be honest. That's why all of them are against Donald Trump, and y'all can vote for whoever you want to. But everybody's panicky about him because he's different. And whether you like him or don't like him, he's not the classic politician, because the Democrats and the Republicans have all voted these same people. They've approved these same people to be. The Attorney General, for example, Loretta Lynch, there's been a lot of criticism of her. How did she get to be the Attorney General? The Senate approved her. Now, see, so much for the Republicans. All right. I predict that the United States government will sign an international agreement. In other words, this will go through the United Nations to restrict weapons. And when it comes up in court, that will trump the United States Constitution. That's what I predict. I think that'll be the ultimate weapon that the president will use. I'm surprised he hasn't already done it. He may have, but it just hasn't come out yet. All right, here's a third thing. In the last 12 months since I was with y'all, I'm trying to tell you what's going on so you can see the trends. As Fox News calls it, the breaking news. This is the breaking news. The world is rapidly moving towards a global government, and that global government will eventually be headed by the Antichrist. Now, have you heard this term in the news, global warming? Happens all the time. See, it used to be that just every now and then somebody would talk about global warming, and we'd just say, well, there's a nut. Somebody. Now we hear it all the time. Now tell me this isn't really true. I don't watch the news. I just watch when there's a crisis. Did Bernie Sanders really say that terrorism was caused by global warming? If he did, he makes Nancy Pelosi look smart. Because the dumbest thing I ever heard was Nancy Pelosi saying, let's vote for Obamacare so we can find out what's in it. But that is intelligent compared to Bernie Sanders. If he said that terrorism was caused by global warming, terrorism is caused by Islamic fundamentalists. But see, the idea of global warming, what's the first word in the phrase global warming? Global, how about it? We got it. I knew I was dealing with an intelligent audience. Global. It's not American warming. It's not South American warming. It's global warming. And if it's global warming, what kind of problem does that imply that it is? A world problem. Therefore, who needs to be involved in solving it? The whole world. And how can you make people, if you say, well, global warming is caused by fossil fuels and burning fossil fuels, and therefore we need to get rid of all these automobiles, and because we're warming up the environment and we're making a world unsafe and all of that. You see, it has to be a worldwide solution, because if everybody in America gave up their cars, and we're not going to do that, are we? Especially on Friday and Saturday night when we can be cruising the Strip. What would happen to the Strip if we gave up our cars? But even if everybody in America turned in their keys tomorrow, took them back to the dealership, gave up your automobile, that wouldn't solve global warming, because global warming is worldwide. Therefore, you're going to have a worldwide leader. See, doesn't it make sense? That's where we're headed. And I think global warming, again, is a diversion to get the people to buy into the idea that we need more than just America. We need all the countries to fight this, and therefore, if you have to have all the countries working together, you're going to have a global government. You're going to have somebody to tell everybody what to do. That's where we're headed. Doesn't sound too good, does it? You see why I'm not so excited about 2016? Can someone take me back to 2015? We're going to have to go on. The good news is our redemption is drawing nigh. As Jonathan said tonight earlier, if you're a child of God, this might be the year that Jesus comes. I'm talking about for the church. Jesus will not return to rule as king until the war of Armageddon, which will be at the end of the 7-year tribulation. But Jesus could certainly come for the church, and it could be this year. I don't know. But I don't say this year because I don't know. But I'm just saying what I think is going to happen. And Jonathan, you can go ahead. We'll have a hymn of invitation, a couple of verses maybe. If you'll just go ahead and get us ready, and our musicians, if y'all would get ready for us. I believe that the refugee crisis is so great that it's going to overwhelm the governments of Europe, and they're going to have a strong leader to come out of that, or else Europe will be changed forever. And that strong leader, whatever the world calls him, the Bible calls him the Antichrist. I believe that gun control will eventually be handled by an international agreement that will override the United States Constitution. I believe that global warming is just one of the ways in which the world leaders are moving to try to get all the governments together under one umbrella. And the Bible predicts very clearly in Revelation, the 13th chapter, that there will eventually be a one world government, because it says there will be a mark of the beast that everybody will have to take to buy or sell. Now, if everybody's got to have that, it's going to be a one world government. It's going to be everywhere. You say, well, I'm going to go home and take me another Valium. No, what we need to do is pray and make sure our own heart's right before God. And I'll admit that this is hard. It's a fine line between being concerned and just worrying. It's a fine line. And I'm not a good one to tell you not to worry, because, I'd be a hypocrite if I stood up here and said, well, I don't worry about this stuff. Don't bother me, because I know Jesus is coming. Well, I do know that. But he doesn't necessarily say that you and I won't go through some suffering before he gets here. But, and I'm a natural pessimist. I hate being that way. My mom and dad were pessimists. I was born with 2 pessimist genes. I'm just telling you, I guess I always look on but I consider myself a realist, but most people would think I'm a pessimist. Because most people, are all, in fact, on Facebook, all I've seen the last 3 or 4 days is everybody's all pumped up about the new year. They just think I don't know why they're so excited. And by the way, I do not deny global warming. It could be. I don't say that, but I'm just saying, how are they planning to solve it? That's what scares me. How do they plan to resolve it? I don't know. Global warming could be a reality. The question to me is, are we sure what's causing it? They can obviously figure out if it's happening, but do we know for sure what's causing it? Or is this just some political thing to get the countries to give up their freedom? But back to that scripture in Ezekiel, I told you about verse 11, but I think it's in verse 7 where God told Ezekiel, I want you to be a watchman. He said, I want you to stand on the wall and blow the trumpet and warn the people. That's what I've tried to do to you tonight. If you listen, my prayer is that you will be delivered. If you pay no attention to this, the Bible says your blood will be on your own hands because you didn't listen to the watchman. I'm not the only one blowing this trumpet, but I'm just telling you, I see great danger for our world. And I see the only hope for us where Jesus said, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. If you know Jesus, he's the ultimate ruler of history. He is more powerful than the Antichrist. If you don't know Jesus, you're in a mess because our world is not getting any safer. In fact, I predict more terrorist attacks will come this year, and I'm surprised they didn't come on New Year's with 2 million people on the street in New York. I'm always amazed they pull that thing off. Just people packed in there everywhere. I know they have all kinds of extra policemen there, but still, when you got a crowd that big. But, you know, here we are. I'm just saying, we're not even discussing the issues. We're on the sidetrack to get people arguing about the Confederate flag or gun control, and pay no attention to the terrorists. They're moving into your neighborhood, but don't pay any attention to that. Let's have an argument about gun control. Let's stand for prayer. I'll go on all night. In fact, I feel better now than when I came, with more energy than when I came. So we better quit while we can. Now, tomorrow night through Wednesday night, we'll be on the book of Esther if you'd like to read ahead. There's 10 chapters, so basically about 3 chapters a night should do us. We will probably go 1 solid hour, no breaks, but then when that hour's up, we'll be through. In other words, it won't be a split session. But I love the book of Esther. I hope it'll be a blessing. If you want to read ahead, though, feel free to do that. Then you'll sort of be aware of what's going on. But I would like for just to have a couple of verses of something that Jonathan selected for us, because I don't know. Somebody might want to come pray at an altar. I realize in most Baptist churches the altar's pretty much obsolete, but we need to get it back. We need to go back to the altar. If it's just something bothering you, I'll turn the microphone off if you want just me and you to pray about it, and it'll just be between us. If it's something, you know, that's bothering you, if it's somebody here tonight, out of all this many people, surely there'd be somebody that's never been saved. I can just imagine hearing this, if you're not even saved, and hearing that the Antichrist is coming and all this stuff. It's overwhelming. But, you know, I don't think we can scare people into heaven. But at the same time, if I could, I would. You know, if there's some way to do it, I'd do it. Because I'm just telling you, we need to get right, because time is quickly running out for us. Lord, thank you tonight for your word. I know I've stumbled and stuttered around and gone around in circles, but I do pray that somehow, some way, the Holy Spirit has taken these stammering lips, feeble mind, and impressed upon someone here tonight what's really happening. You tell us to be a watchman, to stand on the wall, and when we see the enemy coming, to blow the trumpet. That's what I've tried to do tonight. The enemy is coming. We're sound asleep in America. I pray we'd wake up. I pray that we Christians would wake up and stand up and speak up in a world that is becoming more weird every day. I pray especially for the young people here tonight who will bear the brunt of Supreme Court decisions and things to come. I pray for mercy on America. I do not ask that you bless America, but that you be merciful to America. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.